All right, welcome to a quick video on our review here. I want to kind of talk you through each of the different problems. So if you're having some trouble, you can get a little help and kind of feel comfortable for our test tomorrow. So work through each problem. The first thing to do is read each one of them carefully. You'll notice some important instructions with these problems. It says, show how you use rates to solve each of your problems. Okay, there's always lots of different strategies that you can use to attack a problem. This unit in particular is looking at how to use rates and ratios. So that's the method that we need to show as we're working through these problems. So first one says, Kelly can type 120 words in 3 minutes. We want to know how many words can she type per minute. That's really code for how many can she type in 1 minute. Well, if it's one of something, that's the definition of a unit rate. So we start by writing out the rate, 120 words over 3 minutes, and then we need to turn it into a unit rate. Well, remember to turn anything into a unit rate, you simply divide by your denominator, because we want to make that denominator into a 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1 minute. 120 divided by 3 is 40 words. So if she can type 120 words in 3 minutes, she can type she can type 40 words per minute, meaning in 1 minute. Next one, it says it took Jarvis 18 minutes to jog 4 laps. How many minutes would it take him to jog 9 laps? Well, again, start with what we know. 18 minutes over 4 laps. In this case, we don't want to go to 1 minute. We want to go to, or sorry, not 1 lap. We want to go to 9 laps. So our goal is to get to 9 laps. So 9 laps. We want to know how many minutes. Well, the problem in this case is that a 4 doesn't turn into a 9 very nicely. Now, if you can figure out a way to multiply a 4 times something to get to 9, that's fine, as long as you show that worked. But for most of us, what we're going to do is we're going to turn it into a unit rate. We're going to find out how much it is for 1 lap, and then we can make it into however many laps we want. So just like the last problem, to turn it into a unit rate, we always divide by our denominator. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, so 1 lap, that's what we want. 18 divided by 4 is going to be 4.5 minutes. Now we want to go from 1 lap to 9 laps. Well, to get from 1 to 9, I just multiply times 9. I just multiply times how many I want. So I do the same thing to my 4.5. 4.5 times 9 is 40.5 minutes. If I can do 18 minutes in 4 laps, I can do 9 laps in 40.5 minutes. All right, next one. The sewing club makes blankets. Trying to get it to scroll for me here. So a sewing club makes 8 blankets by using 48 feet of fabric. At this rate, how many blankets can be made from 36 feet of fabric? Use rates to determine your answer. All right, remember, feel free to pause me, rewind me, watch things again, pause while you're writing things down, whatever you need to do to help yourself work through this. Don't feel like you gotta go as fast as I do. So I always start with my rate. 8 blankets over 48 feet. Again, then look at what you're aiming for. Well, I'm aiming for 36 feet. Okay. If you can find a way to go from 48 to 36 by multiplying or dividing, go for it. But most of us, we're going to have a tough time going from 48 to 36. So instead, we're going to make it into a unit rate. Listen carefully for this next part because it's kind of important. So I'm going to divide by 48, and you're going to notice you get a big, long, ugly decimal. So it's 0.166666666 repeating blankets over 1 foot. Okay, so I can't make a whole blanket with just 1 foot of material, which makes sense. It'd be a really short blanket if I made it only out of 1 foot. Now I want to go from 1 to 36. Well, to go from 1 to 36, I multiply times 36. So I'm going to do the same thing to my top number. So here's the important part. chances are on your piece of paper, you shortened that decimal because your calculator was probably full of sixes, 0.1666666 repeated, but you probably just wrote it down with a couple of them. Okay, here's the key. When you go to do the multiplying, when we're going to multiply by 36, we want to multiply by that full decimal, that full 1.6666 repeated. I'm going to do that number times 36, and I get 6 blankets. Okay, in your calculator, if you only did maybe 0.16, okay, maybe you did 0.16 times 36, you're going to get 5.76. And here's why. You shortened the decimal, which threw off your answer a little bit. So if you were to go back in and do it with a whole bunch of those sixes in there, you would get that 6 as an answer, or you might get 5.999 or something like that, which we can round up to 6. Okay, it's because you're shortening your decimal when you're typing it in. That's what's causing your answer to be off by just a little bit. So to get closer to my answer, put that whole decimal in there with all those repeated sixes in there. Okay. Next one, number 4. How many goats are there on a farm with 8 pigs if there are 45 goats on a farm with 5 pigs? So we're kind of finding the ratio of pigs and goats. So always start with the rate. How much of one thing to how much of something else? So I have 45 goats over 5 pigs. That's our rate. We want to know how many for 8 pigs. So again, as we've talked about a lot in class, let those units help you line things up. Pigs was on the bottom, so pigs is on the bottom over here. Now I want to go from 5 to 8. Well, 5 doesn't turn into an 8 very nicely. I'd have to use some decimals. If you're comfortable with that, go for it. But if not, we're going to turn into a unit rate. So we're going to divide by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So 1 pig, which is what we want. We want a unit rate. How much for one of something? 45 divided by 5 is 9. So our unit rate is there are 9 goats for every 1 pig. Well, now we want to go from 8 or 1 pig to 8 pigs. Well, to go from 1 to 8, we just multiply times 8. We're always thinking multiplying or dividing. 9 times 8, remember you got to treat both numbers equally, gives me 72 goats for 8 pigs. Okay? All right, almost done. So number 5, Mia saves $40 in 8 weeks. Her sister Charlotte saves $18 in 3 weeks. Are these rates equivalent? Meaning, are they saving their money at the same rate? And we want to know, how did you know? Well, this time we have 2 rates. So we start by setting up 2 rates. $40 in 8 weeks, $18 in 3 weeks. Now, if you remember back to our equivalent rates lesson, we had 2 ways of going for it. One is we can try to look for, is there a way to go from an 8 to a 3? Is there something I can multiply or divide by easily to go from one to the other? Okay, in this case, there's not. So we always go with our backup plan. When in doubt, make them into unit rates. If something has the same unit rate, okay, if it's the same amount for one, then it's going to be an equivalent rate. So I'm going to divide by 8, always divide by that denominator, and I'm going to get $5 per 1 week. Over here, I'm going to divide by 3, again, divide by your denominator. 18 divided by 3 is $6 for 1 week. So it says, are they equivalent? Well, is $5 a week the same thing as $6 a week? No. So we would say not equivalent because they have different unit rates. That's how we know. That's our explanation of how did we determine it. All right, last one, our ratio table. For a problem where I give you a ratio table, I need you to use the ratio table. So we've come up with lots of different strategies for solving problems, but I want you to have lots of tools at your disposal, not to always go back to whichever one you're most comfortable with. It's good to challenge yourself and make sure you can use different strategies for solving a problem. For this one, it says, for 30 tickets, it costs $75. We want to know how much would it cost for 55 tickets. So in a ratio table, remember we always say, how did I go from one number to the next? That's my starting location. Well, I need to go from 30 to something and then to a 55. There are really kind of two options. I can go down to a 5 or I can go down to a 1. Both of them work just fine. Okay. Remember what I said? When in doubt, you can always go down to a 1. So if all else fails, you're not sure what to use, just use a 1. So let's use that. Let's go ahead and go to a 1. Well, I went from a 30 to a 1. Well, to do that, I would have had to divide by 30. So the rules are, since these are equivalent rates in our ratio table, we have to treat them equally. So if I divide it by 30 here, I'm going to divide by 30 here. 75 divided by 30 is $2.50. Remember, we're talking about money, so 2.5 would not be correct. Now I need to go from 1 to my final answer of 55. Remember that 1 was an equivalent rate, but it was helping me go from one to the other because it's hard to go from a 30 directly to a 55. Well, to do that, I would multiply times 55. So I do the same thing here. Remember, you treat both parts of the ratio table equally. Here we divided them both by 30. Here we're multiplying them both by 55. So I type in my calculator, $2.50 times 55 gives me $62.50. Not 62.5. We're talking about money, so it always has to have two decimal places. So it would cost $62.50 to get 55 tickets. Oh, that doesn't seem right. Hold on one second. Oh, sorry, I typed in my calculator wrong. Ignore me there. Okay, I was talking crazy talk. I must have mistyped it in my calculator here. $2.50 times 55 is $137.50. Okay, sorry about that. So we went from 30 down to a 1. You could have also gone down to a 5. Whatever I did to one part of the problem, I do the same thing to the other part. So I also divided the 75 by 30. Okay, always think of I do the same thing to that second part of the problem. And then I went from 1 to 55, so I multiplied times 55. So I did the same thing down here and got $137.50. All right, hope that helped. Okay, ask questions, see me for some help, and I'll see you tomorrow.